How to find your purpose in life. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe and ring the bell for more videos. Are you struggling to discover your purpose? That may be because you feel isolated from other people. Here's how you can overcome that. Do you have a sense of purpose? For decades, psychologists have studied how long-term, meaningful goals develop over the span of our lives. The goals that foster a sense of purpose are ones that can potentially change the lives of other people, like launching an organization, researching disease, or teaching kids to read. Indeed, a sense of purpose appears to have evolved in humans so that we can accomplish big things together, which may be why it's associated with better physical and mental health. Purpose is adaptive in an evolutionary sense. It helps both individuals and the species to survive. Many seem to believe that purpose arises from your special gifts and sets you apart from other people, but that's only part of the truth. It also grows from our connection to others, which is why a crisis of purpose is often a symptom of isolation. Once you find your path, you'll almost certainly find others traveling along with you, hoping to reach the same destination, a community. Here are 6 ways to overcome isolation and discover your purpose in life. 1. Read. Reading connects us to people we'll never know, across time and space, an experience that research says is linked to a sense of meaning and purpose. Note, meaning and purpose are related but separate social scientific constructs. Purpose is a part of meaning. Meaning is a much broader concept that usually also includes value, efficacy, and self-worth. In a 2010 paper, for example, Leslie Francis studied a group of nearly 26,000 teenagers throughout England and Wales and found that those who read the Bible more tended to have a stronger sense of purpose. Secular reading seems to make a difference as well. In a survey of empirical studies, Raymond A. Marr and colleagues found a link between reading poetry and fiction and a sense of purpose among adolescents. Reading fiction might allow adolescents to reason about the whole lives of characters, giving them specific insight into an entire lifespan, without having to have fully lived most of their own lives, they suggest. By seeing purpose in the lives of other people, teens are more likely to see it in their own lives. In this sense, purpose is an act of the imagination. Many people I interviewed for this article mentioned pivotal books or ideas they found in books. The writing of historian W.E.B. Du Bois pushed social justice activist Art McGee to embrace a specific vision of African American identity and liberation. Journalist Michael Stoll found inspiration in the social responsibility theory of journalism, which he read about at Stanford University. Basically, reporters and editors have not just the ability but also the duty to improve their community by being independent arbiters of problems that need solving, he says. It's been my professional North Star ever since. Spurred by this idea, Michael went on to launch an award-winning nonprofit news agency called the San Francisco Public Press. So, if you're feeling a crisis of purpose in your life, go to the bookstore or library or university. Find books that matter to you and they might help you to see what matters in your own life. 2. Turn hurts into healing for others. Of course, finding purpose is not just an intellectual pursuit, it's something we need to feel. That's why it can grow out of suffering, both our own and others. Join the Purpose Challenge. Want to help high schoolers find purpose? The GGSC's Purpose Challenge for students, educators, and parents incorporates cutting-edge science into videos and interactive exercises. Students can get help with their college essay and win up to $25,000 in scholarship money. Kezia Willingham was raised in poverty in Corvallis, Oregon, her family riven by domestic violence. No one at school intervened or helped or supported my mother, myself, or my brother when I was growing up poor, ashamed, and sure that my existence was a mistake, she says. I was running the streets, skipping school, having sex with strangers, and abusing every drug I could get my hands on. When she was 16, Kezia enrolled at an alternative high school that led me to believe I had options and a path out of poverty. She made her way to college and was especially drawn to the kids with issues, kids like the one she had once been. She says, I want the kids out there who grew up like me to know they have futures ahead of them. I want them to know they are smart, even if they may not meet state academic standards. I want them to know that they are just as good and valuable as any other human who happens to be born into more privileged circumstances, because they are. And there are so damn many messages telling them otherwise. Sometimes, another person's pain can lead us to purpose. When Christopher Pepper was a senior in high school, a trembling, tearful friend told him that she had been raped by a classmate. I comforted as well as I could and left that conversation vowing that I would do something to keep this from happening to others, says Christopher. He kept that promise by becoming a peer rape educator in college and then a sex educator in San Francisco public schools. Why do people like Kezia and Christopher seem to find purpose in suffering while others are crushed by it? Part of the answer, as we'll see next, might have to do with the emotions and behaviors we cultivate in ourselves. 3. Cultivate awe, gratitude, and altruism. Certain emotions and behaviors that promote health and well-being can also foster a sense of purpose, specifically awe, gratitude, and altruism. Several studies conducted by the Greater Good Science Center's Dr. Kellner have shown that the experience of awe makes us feel connected to something larger than ourselves and so can provide the emotional foundation for a sense of purpose. Of course, all by itself won't give you a purpose in life. It's not enough to just feel like you're a small part of something big. You also need to feel driven to make a positive impact on the world. That's where gratitude and generosity come into play. It may seem counterintuitive to foster purpose by cultivating a grateful mindset, but it works, right? Psychologist Kendall Bronk, a leading expert on purpose. As research by William Damon, Robert Emmons, and others has found, children and adults who are able to count their blessings are much more likely to try to contribute to the world beyond themselves. This is probably because, if we can see how others make our world a better place, we'll be more motivated to give something back. Here we arrive at altruism. There's little question, at this point, that helping others is associated with a meaningful, purposeful life. In one study, for example, Daryl Van Tongeren and colleagues found that people who engage in more altruistic behaviors, like volunteering or donating money, tend to have a greater sense of purpose in their lives. Interestingly, gratitude and altruism seem to work together to generate meaning and purpose. In a second experiment, the researchers randomly assigned some participants to write letters of gratitude, and those people later reported a stronger sense of purpose. More recent work by Christina Carnes and colleagues found that altruism and gratitude are neurologically linked, activating the same reward circuits in the brain. 4. Listen to what other people appreciate about you. Giving thanks can help you find your purpose. But you can also find purpose in what people thank you for. Like Kezia Willingham, Sean Taylor had a tough childhood, and he was also drawn to working with kids who had severe behavioral problems. Unlike her, however, he often felt like the work was a dead end. I thought I sucked at my chosen profession, he says. Then, one day, a girl he'd worked with 5 years before contacted him. She detailed how I helped to change her life, says Sean, and she asked him to walk her down the aisle when she got married. Sean hadn't even thought about her in all that time. Something clicked and I knew this was my path. No specifics, but youth work was my purpose. The artists, writers, and musicians I interviewed often described how appreciation from others fueled their work. Donnie Burleson never lacked a sense of purpose, and she toiled for years as a writer and social justice activist in Santa Rosa, California. But when wildfires swept through her community, Donnie discovered that her strengths were needed in a new way. I've found that my networking and emergency response skills have been really helpful to my community, my students, and to firefighters. Although there is no research that directly explores how being thanked might fuel a sense of purpose, we do know that gratitude strengthens relationships, and those are often the source of our purpose, as many of these stories suggest. 5. Find and build community. As we see in Donnie's case, we can often find our sense of purpose in the people around us. Many people told me about finding purpose in family. In tandem with his reading, Art McGee found purpose working for social and racial justice and love and respect for my hardworking father, he says. Working people like him deserve so much better. Environmental and social justice organizer Jody Suderman Brosen feels driven to leave the world in a better place than I found it. Becoming a mom strengthened that purpose. It's going to be their world and their kids' world, she says. It definitely influences how I parent, wanting to raise anti-racist, feminist, radical kids who will want to continue the fight and be leaders. Of course, our kids may not embrace our purpose. Amber Cantorna was raised by purpose-driven parents who were right-wing Christians. My mom had us involved in stuff all the time, all within that conservative Christian bubble, she says. This family and community fueled a strong sense of purpose in Amber. To be a good Christian and role model. To be a blessing to other people. The trouble is that this underlying purpose involved making other people more like them. When she came out as a lesbian at age 27, Amber's family and community swiftly and suddenly cast her out. This triggered a deep crisis of purpose, one that she resolved by finding a new faith community that helped shape me and gave me a sense of belonging, she says. Often, the nobility of our purpose reflects the company we keep. The purpose that came from Amber's parents was based on exclusion, as she discovered. There was no place and no purpose for her in that community once she embraced an identity they couldn't accept. A new sense of purpose came with the new community and identity she helped to build of gay and lesbian Christians. If you're having trouble remembering your purpose, take a look at the people around you. What do you have in common with them? What are they trying to be? What impact do you see them having on the world? Is that impact a positive one? Can you join with them in making that impact? What do they need? Can you give it them? If the answers to those questions don't inspire you, then you might need to find a new community, and with that, a new purpose may come. 6. Tell your story. Reading can help you find your purpose, but so can writing. Purpose often arises from curiosity about your own life. What obstacles have you encountered? What strengths helped you to overcome them? How did other people help you? How did your strengths help make life better for others? We all have the ability to make a narrative out of our own lives, says Emily Esfahani Smith, author of the 2017 book The Power of Meaning. It gives us clarity on our own lives, how to understand ourselves, and gives us a framework that goes beyond the day-to-day and basically helps us make sense of our experiences. That's why Amber Cantorna wrote her memoir, Refocusing My Family, Coming Out, Being Cast Out, and Discovering the True Love of God. At first depressed after losing everyone she loved, Amber soon discovered new strengths in herself, and she is using her book to help build a nonprofit organization called Beyond to support gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Christians in their coming out process. One 2008 study found that those who see meaning and purpose in their lives are able to tell a story of change and growth, where they managed to overcome the obstacles they encountered. In other words, creating a narrative like Amber's can help us to see our own strengths and how applying those strengths can make a difference in the world, which increases our sense of self-efficacy. This is a valuable reflective process to all people, but Amber took it one step further by publishing her autobiography and turning it into a tool for social change. Today, Amber's purpose is to help people like her feel less alone. My sense of purpose has grown a lot with my desire to share my story and the realization that so many other people have shared my journey. Living with a purpose changes everything. According to a new book, having a purpose in life is crucial for our health and well-being. Victor Stretcher, a behavioral scientist at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, lost his 19-year-old daughter to a sudden heart attack in 2010. She had been living with a rare heart condition for years. Her fragility and eventual death upended his thoughts on what life should be about and how to live it, and it moved him to write a book called Life on Purpose. The book is a meditative, at times inspirational exploration of the nature of purpose. It both considers how philosophers have long debated the relationship between purpose and happiness, and also shares uplifting stories of individuals who have discovered their purpose. It includes Stretcher's personal revelations as well as those of others who have found their purpose and changed the trajectory of their lives. But the book is also a review of the science of purpose, which has blossomed in recent years. According to Stretcher, the strength of one's life purpose, which involves a combination of living according to your values and goals and striving to make a positive difference in the world, can be measured. And it correlates highly with psychological wellness and even markers of physical health and longevity. For example, studies have found that for every 1-point increase on a 6-point scale measuring purpose in life, adults with heart disease have a 27% decreased risk of having a heart attack over a 2-year period. For older adults, a 1-point difference in purpose can mean a 22% decreased risk of having a stroke. It's not clear how purpose in life would have these impacts, but it's possible that there is some kind of interaction with stress, which has already been shown to affect us at a cellular level. In one study, researchers looked at how meditation might impact gene health in highly stressed mothers. The length of mothers' telomeres, the end caps on genes that tend to shorten with age, were measured before and after some of the moms attended a mindful meditation retreat. Compared to a control group, women who'd received the meditation training did indeed have longer telomeres at the end of the retreat, suggesting better health. But the researchers found that this effect was accounted for not by increases in mindfulness, as expected, but by increases in a sense of life purpose, which the meditation inspired. Studies like these show the potential positive impacts of purpose, which, Stretcher argues, should encourage us to consider promoting it in our schools and workplaces. For example, students who are encouraged to consider education as relevant to their life purpose are more likely to try harder in classes they find boring or hard, such as science and math classes. And businesses that put purpose at the forefront tend to be more enjoyable places to work and more financially successful in the long run than those who only pursue profit. In one study, researchers found that hospital workers were 45% more inclined to use good hand-washing hygiene if they were told it helped prevent patients from catching diseases than if they were told it helped them. Connecting their habits to a service-oriented purpose inspired better behavior. Pointing out to employees that their actions affect others can result in transcending behaviors and save lives, Stretcher says. Putting purpose into action. Of course, giving lip service to having a purpose in life is not going to cut it. It has to be genuine and to truly reflect your goals and values. Also, there is a difference between finding your purpose and acting upon it, says Stretcher. The dynamic process of aligning yourself with your life purpose requires energy and willpower. Wind in your sails to move you forward, and a strong rudder to prevent being blown off course, he writes. But how can we move from imagining our purpose to fulfilling it? Energy and willpower are needed, writes Stretcher, and these can be boosted by making healthier lifestyle choices, sleeping and eating better, exercising, and being more present in your everyday life, e.g., through meditation or Tai Chi or other practices that increase your presence. The relationships between healthy lifestyle choices, energy, willpower, and purpose are all bidirectional, meaning they influence each other, he writes. Therefore, it makes sense to both figure out your purpose and engage more in healthy behaviors in order to have enough energy and willpower to pursue your purpose. Much of his book is devoted to suggesting just how to do that. Though studies found throughout the book lend some credence to Stretcher's claims about the benefits of purpose, they are relatively few in number and not always completely convincing. Even Stretcher acknowledges that the science is still in its infancy. We still don't know very much about interventions meant to increase purpose in life, let alone their results, he writes. Purpose may be more elusive than we realize, perhaps the culmination of a lifetime of personal interactions and individual experiences, and may be next to impossible to foster in the general public. Still, it wouldn't hurt the world if we all started examining our lives in deeper ways and tried a bit harder to find our own purpose. After all, any efforts that increase our desire to help the world are probably positive, and the consequences of not doing so could be dire. If I were you, I wouldn't wait around for more research. I'd just get a purpose, right, Stretcher. The scientific evidence supporting the benefits of one is extremely promising, and, at the risk of sounding a bit alarmist, we need it. Can the science of purpose help explain white supremacy? A sense of purpose makes us physically and psychologically stronger. But what if your purpose is hateful and destructive? A sense of purpose is a source of strength. It was for the Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl when he was sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1944. During his worst moments, Frankl would envision the face of his wife, which led him to this realization that love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man sick can aspire. Indeed, during his time at the camp, Frankl noticed that prisoners who were able to see beyond themselves and help others often stood the greatest chance of day-to-day survival. His wife died in Bergen-Belsen, but Frankl went on to turn this personal insight into a lifelong effort to understand the role of meaning and purpose in human life. I thought about Frankl as I watched video from Charlottesville, Virginia, of men and some women marching with torches and Confederate flags, chanting, "White lives matter, blood and soil, and Jews will not replace us." The specific goal of their march? To protect a statue of Robert E. Lee, the general who led Confederate forces in defense of slavery. These were the American descendants of the Nazis who imprisoned Frankl and killed his wife, and there is no doubt that they too share a strong sense of purpose, one embodied in their chants. As a marcher told a Vice documentary team, "Last night, at the Torch Walk, there were hundreds and hundreds of us. People realize that they are not atomized individuals, they are part of a larger whole. This larger whole killed one woman and seriously injured dozens of counter-protesters." As part of a general movement in psychology to turn from studying human weakness to discovering what helps us to flourish, for almost 2 decades, researchers have explored the questions Frankl raised in his work. Research suggests a commitment to goals bigger than yourself can strengthen your physical health and psychological well-being. But what if achieving your purpose must come at the expense of someone else? Today, what can the science of purpose teach us about the growing movement for white supremacy in America? And how might the answers help us to clarify our own sense of purpose? Purpose is intensely personal, say these studies, and yet it is shaped by the people who surround us. The nobility of our purpose often reflects the quality of the company we keep. The psychology of purpose. Purpose is absolutely a tricky concept, especially as it is possible to have a destructive purpose, says Susan Mangan, a PhD candidate at Claremont Graduate University, who has studied purpose for years. The definition of purpose does not require it to be altruistic. Indeed, a sense of purpose is defined by its inherent profound subjectivity. According to Mangan and her advisor Kendall Bronk, one of the country's leading researchers on purpose can be broken down into three components. It's an ultimate goal that shapes your short-term choices and behavior. It is personally meaningful, coming from within. In other words, no one is standing over you forcing you to pursue your goal. You are self-motivated. The goal imbues your life with importance and value. Finally, a purpose in life goes beyond the self, leading you to want to make a difference in the world. A fairly large body of scientific studies suggests that a sense of purpose evolved to drive us humans to accomplish big things. That may be why it has been linked to a lower risk of heart attack and a longer life. Evolution rewards those with a sense of purpose. Indeed, studies suggest that Frangel's concentration camp observations of who survived and who didn't were probably accurate. We thrive when we are working for some greater good. Some people find purpose in making others laugh, caring for the sick and injured, or just taking care of their families. Others want to protect the environment. Many people find purpose in religion, spreading the word of God, as Christians say. There may well be as many kinds of purpose as there are members of the human family. The Nazis had a purpose as well. We can hear an echo of that time in the words of today's white supremacists. When I joined America's first neo-Nazi skinhead group, suddenly I felt like I could conquer the world, says Christian Picciolini, who eventually left the skinheads to co-found Life After Hate, which helps rehabilitate former hate group members. In an Upworthy documentary, he explains, "I'd been kicked out of 4 high schools, one of them twice, and I met some individuals, and they promised me that the bullies would go away, that my life would get better, that I'd have a family, and that I would have a sense of purpose." That purpose may well have brought good things to Picciolini's individual life, at least for a little while. But what about the impact of his purpose on American society? Are all purposes created equal, or are some better than others? The paradox of purpose. Here we must grapple with the paradox of purpose. It's highly personal and subjective, and yet it always develops in a social context. People don't get to vote on each other's purpose, but we are socialized into meaning and purpose. Your purpose develops from the interaction of your psychology and our society, your individual experiences and our collective events, your opportunities and our limitations. When enough individuals share a common, meaningful goal, society can change. That gets back to what is probably the deep evolutionary purpose of purpose. It facilitates cooperation and helps us to achieve our greatest goals. We shouldn't be surprised if change entails conflict. In fact, we humans are often at cross purposes. As our identities multiply, so do our groups, and we use our groups to apportion resources. When we don't feel there's enough to go around, we fight. On every continent around the world, it is considered noble to give up your life. For your group there is no higher purpose, by some lights. Indeed, that sacrifice is precisely what the statues of Confederate soldiers are intended to honor. To some, taking down reminders of the Confederacy seems to rob their sacrifice of meaning. So, who's right? Let's put aside that non-empirical moral question and instead focus on what psychological and social forces drive us to purpose. The composite picture that emerges from decades of thinking and investigation, starting with Frankl and continuing to the present day with researchers like Bronk, suggests that a sense of purpose develops in tandem with our sense of identity. What kind of purpose children later develop in life is shaped by the values and behaviors of the adults around them. For example, researchers like Jeffrey Froh and Robert Emmons have found that kids who learn to practice gratitude will be better able to see beyond themselves, a critical component in the young adult search for purpose. Is it possible that gratitude and other prosocial behaviors like forgiveness were missing from the childhoods of men and women who grew up to find purpose in white supremacy? Or perhaps their parents and teachers did foster a sense of connection with other people, but restricted it to white people? We can't know for sure from a scientific perspective. There isn't a whole lot of empirical research on ignoble purposes, says Kendall Bronk, which she defines as antisocial or destructive. This is an unfortunate oversight, but as you might imagine, it's a little tougher to get reliable participants and large enough study samples. Even so, Bronk wrote in an email to me, "I believe ignoble purposes likely are associated with some of the positive outcomes typically associated with prosocial purposes, e.g., sense of belonging, sense of direction, etc., but unlike a more positive sense of purpose." They are unlikely to be associated with other positive outcomes, e.g., humility and empathy. In fact, most white supremacists are perfectly capable of empathy and gratitude, but only for members of their own group. How do we know this? Because there is a huge amount of research that describes intergroup dynamics and the attitudes of in-group extremists like the marchers in Charlottesville. Children don't just acquire a sense of purpose from adults, they also learn whose lives matter and whose lives do not matter. Studies of people who commit acts of terrorism and mass murder by researchers like Mark Sageman and Martha Crenshaw converge with wider research on intergroup conflict to reveal the roots of atrocities. It's not individual-level dysfunction. There is no consistent psychological profile that predicts who will become a terrorist. Instead, researchers find the roots of group violence in the groups themselves. People with a strong sense of purpose kill for other people. They kill for their families, tribes, nations. They are part of groups that valorize aggression and deceit against outsiders. Many of our political conflicts in the United States, as Charlottesville suggests, are really about who belongs in the group. Should we remember Robert E. Lee as American, or was he a traitor? Are African Americans American, or does each one need to produce a birth certificate, as President Trump demanded of President Obama? Are those two concepts of American mutually exclusive? These kinds of conflict create feelings of social uncertainty, where many Americans are not at all sure of who they are or where they belong. In that kind of ambiguous, insecure situation, many cultural and social factors could interact with each other to warp the identity and purpose of each individual. When Americans, in contrast to some other cultures, continue to search for purpose in adulthood, after most people have supposedly found one, we tend to become unhappy and desperate. For young and older adults who have failed to find their own purpose, like Christian Picciolini, white supremacy could be an appealing alternative. People also find meaning in work. If they feel cut off from meaningful work, they may be more likely to turn to in-group extremism as a way to make a difference in the world. Leadership matters too. One of the roles of a leader is to articulate, clarify, communicate, and nurture a sense of purpose in a group. President Trump came up with a brilliant sense of purpose in his campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." Who could disagree with that? The trouble, however, lies in how those words are defined by their context. Start with America. The president kicked off his political career by promoting the birther conspiracy theory that President Obama was not born a U.S. citizen, and has since campaigned and governed with anti-Latino rhetoric and anti-Muslim policies. Through these words and actions, the Trump administration has consistently tried to position some citizens as more American than others, fostering a sense of conflict among groups. What about great? Is building a wall between the U.S. and Mexico a sign of greatness or of fear? The next word, again, implies we need to get back to an earlier time, but what time is that? Does that refer to the period of Jim Crow and explicitly racist immigration laws? Or does it mean a return to the 1960s, when Americans extended civil rights to disenfranchised citizens and sent human beings to the moon? As goals go, Great Again suffers from a lack of specificity, and its realization splits Americans along fault lines of collective memory and identity. It's little wonder the people who marched with torches in Charlottesville wore "Make America Great Again" t-shirts and baseball caps, or that they felt free to march at all. What is our common purpose? Of course, we can't really know for sure why white supremacy, after decades in the shadows, is suddenly making a comeback. But we do know where white supremacy leads, as Frankl's life and work attests. He also reminds us that there is meaning, if not happiness, in opposing racism and violence. In this conflict, a sense of moral clarity is essential. We might choose to march, for a moment, in the shoes of people we oppose, and even try to elicit the good from them, without for a moment compromising our sense of right and wrong, or yielding an inch of public space to their purpose. Human kindness can be found in all groups, even those which as a whole it would be easy to condemn, writes Frankl. The boundaries between groups overlapped, and we must not try to simplify matters by saying that these men were angels and those were devils. Out of context, Frankl may seem to be letting people like the Nazis off the hook, but that is far from the truth. He was an implacable intellectual foe of the forces that killed his wife and put him through years of hell. His purpose was wider than simply destroying one group so that another might live. Rather, he sought to help all of us find the angels in each other and in ourselves. That, to his mind, is how we become great. This is a confusing, demoralizing time for many Americans. But as Frankl argued, purpose can help us keep going, even in the bleakest of circumstances. So, what is your purpose? What is the company you keep, and how do the people you know shape and sustain your purpose? Are they a source of strength? Do you know what makes their lives meaningful? Do you know what purposes you might hold in common with them? Could your shared purpose make the world a better place?